this is a subject I'm actually too scared to go in depth with and touch on, a subject which if I share my opinions could actually end up getting me in trouble. But either way, Silent Hill has a rich history, and being one of the most prolific horror franchises of all time, which is able to draw eyes even when it misses, Silent Hill really holds a special place in so many people's hearts, and that's why I'm scared to talk about this. Despite being a horror fan, I haven't really spoke about the Silent Hill franchise, which is odd because I draw so much information and love from the horror that I enjoy, which also includes Silent Hill. But Silent Hill and all that surrounds it doesn't allow me to feel confident in the same way. There are so many moving parts and components that go to making a Silent Hill important to so many different people. And there are elements game to game that aren't always the same or mean the same thing to different people. Some may enjoy the occult stuff of the first and the third game, while others want the psychological dreamscapes of the second and even Downpour. To put a finger on something that makes this franchise so special, I would need to show you this and take it apart and look at it almost on a surgical level, almost like ingredients to food. Macaroni and cheese is my favourite food of all time, and there's a lot I can say about creating this wonderful dish, and there's a perfect allegory for Silent Hill. Let's get cooking. Now, to talk about Silent Hill and macaroni and cheese, we need to look at what macaroni and cheese is. Macaroni and cheese, especially as I know to a lot of Americans out there, you can be tempted to pick up a simple craft box of macaroni and cheese and make it in a matter of minutes, and I just can't allow that. Silent Hill was a game, and an idea isn't something you can just make in a microwave recipe. I've never even personally made one, and I will refuse to ever do so. But games like Silent Hill Homecoming, Origins and Downpour almost feel like they fall for this trap. They lack the flavour and the heart that is required for this franchise, putting together basic ingredients that only mimic what people expect from this calibre of macaroni video game. For me, when it comes to Silent Hill, it's about the heart and not outsourcing the original, but instead going for fresh and new ingredients with each plate, allowing each plate to have their own individual flavours like the original trilogy and even PT, adding layers of texture and care to each bowl of mac and cheese. And that's why we're starting from scratch in this video, and that brings us to step 1. Now, it's very easy to think that with a name like macaroni and cheese, macaroni should be the only pasta you use. And you know what, to a degree this is correct. And if there was a Silent Hill protagonist who is macaroni, of course it has to be James from Silent Hill 2. James is the macaroni every other base macaroni and cheese strives to be. He's perfect in his shape and he works so beautifully. He's not too big and he has a lot of depth to work with as a pasta. And it's his elbow macaroni which is the template for all macaroni and cheese. But also Silent Hill strives to have its own individuality and tries to get away from elbow pasta, and you can use many other types of pasta here which share very similar textures and almost work just as well. A close second, and maybe one of my second favourite pastas to use, is of course penne pastas. Penne is your Heathers, your Harrys, and even to a degree your Murphy Pendletons. They share a very similar body to macaroni pasta, but of course with a huge difference here. There's a size and history and legacy that must be held onto when using Heather or even Harry. There's this weight of legacy that comes with this type of character who must either deeply connect back to the origins of Silent Hill, or in Murphy's case, at least resemble Macaroni and James, which almost mimics James' story in a very different yet similar style. While on the other side, though still very functional but not intended for this kind of sauce, you have Fusilli. These are your Alexes and even Travises to a degree, and maybe even Henrys from Silent Hill 4. They don't really fit in the mold of what the franchise is known for, but nonetheless they make it work and they almost stand out on their own. They work as a supplement to give off the illusion that you're eating a brilliant macaroni and cheese, but they do not work with the original shape of what macaroni and cheese is originally intended to be, therefore they stand out on their own regard. The reason why Fusilli almost feels like it doesn't work as well as penne or even macaroni on its own is because of its twisted shape, allowing the cheese to drip off it instead of having it be in a cylinder, which allows the traumatizing cream sauce to retain and hide within the cylinders of the macaroni pasta. Fusilli allows this to drip off, and you see a lot of its traumas coming almost a mile off, and it's just too predictable. So as I said though, we are going to just use the baseline, and that's going to be James Macaroni because of its great shape, its texture, its size and reasonable cooking time. Moving on to the next step, of course you can't do any of this without a boiling pot. Silent Hill in its later days felt like it was never even given that time to boil. Downpour, PT, Homecoming, and of course that dreaded HD collection, Konami stopped respecting the boil. With rushed management and projects that had rocky performances that were never even finished in the first place. And that's the legacy the modern Silent Hills left behind. Boiling is overall a very important step for all types of pasta, and if you want to, just fill up a pot of water and add just a little bit of salt to allow the pasta not to stick as much, and of course allow the pasta's flavour to take in the salt within the water. Doing boiling right is honestly maybe one of the most important ingredients to the foundation of your video game macaroni and cheese, and there's no need to rush into it. You have to let it sit there and soak. I have seen macaroni and cheese been ruined before in the past because they haven't been boiled enough, and I think this is something we've all seen before. But giving it time to breathe and allowing the water to be buoyant enough for the pasta to float, and when it floats, it allows it to become softer and easier to chew because it's had time to breathe within the boiling pot itself, and of course had time to take in all those salty flavours which you added at the start. Having the right pasta is really just the start of the template of the flavours that every macaroni and cheese will have going forward. And sometimes it's just these basic foundations which companies get wrong and most Silent Hills fall into. Looking at you, Homecoming. Now for me, there are 3 very distinct different degrees that you can allow pasta to boil. You can of course be underdone, nowhere near the standards that you expect from this caliber of dish, with the likes of Homecoming, Origins, Book of Memories, and even Downpour to a degree. There isn't enough give that lets players relate to this type of pasta, and also the characters aren't all that pleasant to stick with, but you can tell there is a foundation for something that could have been special, but allowing them to boil and cook and simmer just a little bit more, you're probably close to something great. I know a lot of people do like al dente pasta, the types of Henry's, Harry's, and even Heather's situations, but I'm honestly not so much of a fan. Sure, they are tough and even lovable to a degree, but I think they are only a few steps away from being truly lovable in my opinion. But despite my own opinion on these characters, you can't deny there's a level of texture and flavour that many people do love, and I understand why people would love al dente pastas in future Silent Hill games. But by leaving it to boil, letting it take in all the salt it can, and allowing the bubbles to let the pasta breathe, you're gonna get it just right. It's soft, it's almost creamy to a degree. There's a foundational level that works at every single angle, and it's easy to cut through with most audiences. It's relatable, understandable, but also on the verge of being the villain, almost just a few minutes away from being too soft and just disappearing in the mouth with a gross like gooey texture. Having it boil just a few moments after the al dente stage gets you right here to the Sunderland stage of boiling. Oh my god, what the fuck am I talking about? It's that flexible nature that allows this kind of character and its world to mold into one beautiful recipe, which brings us onto the world and the flavors that will fill and surround our boiled pastas. A cheese sauce and horror are very similar in nature. They're both very subjective in their own rights. Not one cheese sauce would mean the same to another person, and not one thing will scare everybody. And this really depends on your personality and what you find in your perfect brand of cheese sauce. Maybe you go for a vintage bag of cheese, classic horror flavors that with time are very mature and allow for a very distinct blend from the main character and the richness of its flavors. Or maybe you're experimental and like a mixed bag with some vintage and maybe some red Leicester in there, and horror flavors that come from nowhere but are full of texture. PT, for example, is a mixed bag of cheese if I've ever seen one. You never really know what the next taste is going to be, but you can't deny that it made one hell of a great roux for this kind of dish. Now the thing is, I'm going to sound incredibly boring here. Silent Hill 2 is a cheddar. It really is a bag of simple cheddar of cheese, and cheddar works with every type of horror. It lingers in the mind, in the mouth. It works on crackers, sandwiches, in the atmosphere, hell, even melted with a cheese fondue with some orange chocolate. Leaning on the simplicity of cheddar is what gave the second dish of Silent Hill some of its best moments. But the cheddar is really only the base of the flavors and can't do this alone, of course without any accompanying sauce to go along with it. I know many people will opt to go for a roux, maybe some milk and some flour and even just a dash of cream, but for me I just go all cream, and I'm going to go lactose free because I'm actually lactose intolerant. So if I had a full batch of cream I would shit myself. Like, I've literally got to the stage once where I wiped my arse and it was... Now for me, I go for a single cream because if it's too thick, I find that it totally makes the cheddar flavour dissipate within the mixing stage of the dish. But also it's best to keep it light to allow the cheese to soak in what sauce it can, to allow the sauce itself to become extra gooey. And what does this all represent? The cheeses, the creams, the flavours all coming together. It's all very important because they're like the monsters and world and shit, you know? Yeah. Now that our protagonist has had time to boil and we've chosen the flavours and the texture of our world, it's now time to bring it all together, but the work is far from done. If anything, this is the most important stage of getting those flavours right for any Silent Hill game. First, we add the cream and allow it to blend with the gems, the macaroni pasta I mean. But don't allow it to get burnt to the bottom. Keep stirring as you do so, because once that cream begins to get burnt, you're going to really taste it within the flavours itself, and that will just ruin the entire baseline for the cheese, which is going to go in next. What you want to do with the cream is just keep turning it until you see it beginning to bubble, beginning to boil from the heat. Turn down the heat a little to make sure it isn't overcooking the cream at the bottom of the pot. And with our protagonist and our world coming together, it's now for us to add the support. A good Silent Hill macaroni cheese dish isn't anything without its supporting cast, and that's what this cheddar will now represent. You can't waste any time here either. You need to allow the richness of the cheese to combine perfectly with the cream at the perfect boiling point, making sure it isn't burnt, but also making sure the cream hasn't dissipated too much from the heat and being soaked up from the macaroni. Adding in the cheese here and allowing it to melt within the details and thickening the overall experience of the cream on which we just added. And this is why we go for a light single cream, because if it was too thick, it would almost be too clumpy. Here it's important to just keep turning the macaroni and cheese and finding time to add salt and pepper just to add a little bit of tension and horror in between those flavors, you know what I'm saying? It's important here to every now and then maybe even take it off the heat, allowing just the heat of the bottom of the pot to retain its flavor and making sure that the cheese isn't getting burnt in the process. Keep turning it until you get this rich creamy texture, which is going to taste delicious later on when you're playing it alone in the dark. Keep working in these simple ingredients until you have that perfect Silent Hill taste, giving it maybe a good 3 to 5 minutes of melting time while stirring the pot, and it will be just perfect. Too much of a good thing is sometimes what makes you turn away from it in the first place. I've had many pots of macaroni and cheese and filled up many big bowls of that creamy rich sauce, and I've had times where even that was too much. I am an avid fan of macaroni and cheese. I've even once one year dedicated myself to trying every single ready-made meal macaroni cheese that's available in storefronts, and I could tell you that I got pretty sick of it by the end, because every single one of them tasted so wildly different as I was expecting the taste of that original second dish which people loved so much, and you need to get away from that. Allow your view and horizons to open, and I feel like Silent Hill is often suffocated by the need of people searching for that original flavour. Though yes, Silent Hill 2 is actually a masterpiece, it doesn't mean that there can't be anything special in adding extra ingredients which people really could fall in love with. The way and process that I make macaroni and cheese will be very different from the way that you may make it, or even the way that you prefer it. I enjoy it to be simple, gooey and creamy, while others enjoy it being cooked on the top, filled with many different cheeses, and maybe not even include a single drop of cream. Silent Hill has a very interesting future coming up, and I'm curious to see where all these different flavors and branches and companies are going to take one of the most incredible dishes of horror anyone has ever seen, and I'm ready for everyone to broaden their horizons and allow their taste buds to enjoy something fresh and new, while of course remembering the good old days of eating that original dish of macaroni and cheese and falling in love with what Silent Hill originally gave us. I know how to make my favourite and perfect batch of macaroni and cheese, and so is it available to continue to play Silent Hill 2 and maybe your favourite Silent Hills throughout history, and you're able to go back and recreate those memories whenever you want. But that doesn't mean that once someone has another chance to give it a go, it means you should tear it apart instantly. I'm excited for whatever Silent Hill 2 remake is going to be, whether it's going to be awful, incredible, or maybe the next best thing. It's all about adding your own touch and personality and your own flavours to this genre, which makes Silent Hill so important, and that's how you make the perfect dish of macaroni and cheese. Your own way. It was an April Fool's video, I got you all. I'm actually working on some new stuff. I'm excited to really jump into this year and start being productive again. I'm going to go back to making some essays, but also continue maybe some of the singular game reviews in the same way that I did Batman. The Batman thing was like a weird phase. I needed to get it off my chest and just talk about that series as a whole, and I thank every single person who has watched that video, and I'm excited to jump back into Phobia videos coming soon. So yes, thank you for enjoying this video. Sorry for the macaroni and cheese April Fool's joke. Bye.